Look, one of the things that we have to remember is that if you're going to read the book of Hebrews as a Christian, modern day Christian, you're not going to be able to have any idea what it's really about unless you can become a first century Jew. Because you have to understand what was going on in the life of a first century Jew when this book is being written. That's where we talked about that when we, I think last part, when I wanted to make sure we had the context for the book of Hebrews. You just have to understand that we take for granted that these things are the way they are because they've been the way they are now for over 2,000 years. That wasn't the case for them, though. This was a dramatic and traumatic lifestyle change. Life, and everything was going bye-bye. Okay? Life as they know it was literally, physically, not just spiritually, going to end. And so this was a time of great panic and great depression and they were literally flipping out. What do we do? What do we do? And so this letter was written as a strong encouragement that it's okay. There's a plan. There's a process. There's things in place knowing that this day was coming so that everything will be okay. But see, you can only get there if you could put on the shoes of a first century Jew, pre-70 CE. Then you'll know what they must have been feeling. And that's what the whole idea of you playing the movie through going, what would that look like? Because certainly when we read this stuff, we're reading it through a much more, modern mindset, of everything we've always experienced and always been taught.
When the third temple is in place, would we need to offer sin offerings?
Okay, again, we're going to have to wait and see how it comes about, who puts it together, who's running it, and what's going on, okay? But realize this, though, because this did come up as a question recently, and it does come up almost every Passover. There are people who are making huge, I don't know what the right word is. It's sin. It's an error. They're making these big mistakes. It does say very clearly that you can't just set up an altar in your backyard. You can't go ahead and offer anything just anywhere that you want. That it could only be in the place that he places his name. And once he put it in Jerusalem, that was the end of it. It wasn't going anywhere else. And so there are people, though, today, well, not like literally this day, but like in modern times, in the last couple of years, who I know are slaughtering lambs and putting blood on their doorposts and doing all kinds of things for Passover, and it's wrong. Wrong meaning Scripture says it's wrong. Okay, first of all, they only put blood on the doorpost once, ever. And secondly, you're not supposed to do the lamb thing just anywhere. You had to go do it in the right place in the right way. So you couldn't just set up altars anywhere you wanted. By the way, that's what got Jeroboam in so much trouble and got Dan in so much trouble, because Dan was one of the places they set up an altar that was not authorized. Okay? And so we have to be very careful with that. However, I know the question then becomes, well, what if? I'm hoping to have an inspired good answer for you if and when they build this temple. Okay? Until then, we don't have to worry about it because we just don't want to have to worry about it. There's no reason. But if they actually start putting it together and building it, I am hopeful that somebody, if not me, but at least somebody will have a good answer as to what we're supposed to do then. But let's understand this. What Yeshua did had nothing, zero, to do with the sacrificial system. Okay, so his doing what he did didn't negate or wipe out the need for that sacrificial system. They are two separate things. Completely separate. The sacrificial system, it was not something that Yeshua fulfilled by what he did, and then it wipes it all out. Everybody kept going till there was no more temple. So we have to be careful that we're not misunderstanding what his death, burial, and resurrection was about. It wasn't anything to do with the sacrificial system. Maybe we don't understand everything about why it was in existence and what its purpose was, but I can tell you that what he did had nothing to do with it specifically. When I say nothing, I mean it did not wipe it out, was not the end-all, be-all of sacrifices, blah, 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 blah. Okay? It's a whole different thing. Besides which, where was he killed? Was he killed in the temple? No. That already proves it's different. Okay? Now, do you want to connect him to the red heifer? Go right ahead. That's not a bad example. Because the red heifer also was slaughtered outside, not inside. Okay, there are other things that you can link to what he did and how that connects to some of the things that Israel did in ancient times, but it was not part of the sacrificial system. And so the good question that will be a really incredibly important question. If they do start the sacrifices and do rebuild the temple, even if they just restart the sacrifices by resetting up the altar, will be, well, what are we supposed to do? That's a good question. What I can tell you for sure is that Christianity will have a meltdown. Okay? Okay, Christianity will all have a collective cow. It'll be the biggest cow you ever saw. Okay? And that they won't be too big to sacrifice. Okay? But the thing is, and so Randy, your question is a good one. And I'm hoping to have a good answer for it when that time comes. Okay? I lean on the Ruach for answers, and I'm not afraid to tell you I don't have one. I just know that we'll need one when that happens because it'll be a legitimate problem. Okay? What do we do? But it also has to do with, is it a legitimate temple? Does it have legitimate Levitical priests? I mean, it has to do with a lot of things. Anybody could set up a temple. Anybody can do anything. So I'm hoping that when this happens, and scripturally it's going to happen, but there's not a verse that tells us what we're supposed to do when that happens. So we just have to see. Now I'm hoping, Trisha was just going, what about the two witnesses? I'm hoping that they will be around at the right timing to let us know. Because those two guys are going to know exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And they're going to be giving that message. And so I'm just prayerfully hoping that the timing is that they are there right in time for the other thing at the same time. So, but good question, because I agree with you. I want to do what I'm supposed to do. And if that gets put into place, am I supposed to or not? And I don't have a good answer for you at this moment.
What I'm seeing here is that this raises a question of how willing are we to sacrifice ourselves for Yeshua's sake?
It's a great point. Okay? Again, if you're staying home and not coming when you could come, are you sacrificing of yourself? Because it's not just meeting and assembling together, but you know what? You're supposed to be meeting with him. I didn't say that during the teaching. I certainly could have. But this is a Mikra Kodesh. It's a commanded assembly, and the Mikra Kodesh, the Hebrew actually has more of the idea of like a date, like an appointment, like a wedding, like a date, like a special occasion gathering together between people that are special to each other. And so the one we're meeting with is our Creator. And so why would you want to stay home if Yeshua actually was going to be here literally, where you would see him and everything, would you have stayed home? Well, he is literally here. Well, at least we hope he would be, assembling and meeting with us. So why would you stay home and miss out on that? Now, again, I have complete empathy for those who are on the live stream and who are watching this video who can't go to an assembly. There's nothing to go to. And actually, Rabbi Tom brought up a really good point, which is there's a lot of places where people could go that are conveniently located, but they're really not good places to go because they're not teaching the truth, at least not in its fullness enough, where they're teaching so much error that it's very uncomfortable to sit there. And sometimes I know people, as they say, well, but I need a fellowship so badly, I can tolerate all that. Well, maybe you can and maybe you can't. I've tried that in the past and I couldn't do it. It got to a point, my wife will tell you, where I just said, I can't do this anymore. As much as I wanted the fellowship, the consistent putting forth of things that just weren't true was too much. Now, did I go and attack the leader? No. Did I go and talk to other people in the congregation about it? No. The only person I said anything to was my wife. I just said, I'm not going anymore. And I just stopped going. I did not attack, criticize, correct, because guess what? I was a rabbi at the time, okay? I wasn't with an assembly. This is as I was coming out of our journey. I certainly could have thought, well, I'm a rabbi. I can go and correct this guy. No, I was an attendee of a congregation. I was a congregant. And it was not my place or my position to correct anybody. And let that be an example. Because I certainly could have made every rational lie to myself of why I should have gone up to the guy and straightened him out. It wasn't my congregation, it was his. He was put in that position, not me. I also could have tried to split the congregation and gathered people to myself. Not even a thought. Never even said a word to anybody else in the congregation. I just stopped going. And let that be a lesson to you guys. If you ever find yourself in a place, that's the right way to handle it. Abba will take care of the rest. But everybody wants to think it's their job to correct everybody and to do all these other things and to step up. I mean, I certainly think that I had all the credentials to do it. I could have convinced myself, but it was wrong. I was a guest. I was visiting. I was assembling. I didn't plant. I didn't water. It wasn't my place. If the people of that congregation and the elders and leadership were comfortable with what was going on, then that's what it was. That's what I tell all of you guys. Your job is to find what you're supposed to be under, not to attack what you're under because it's not what you like. If you don't like it, don't stay under it. Move. You go somewhere else, and don't try to stir everybody else to go with you either.
All right, Effie has a question about how does one reconcile those who keep the law and works, but whose hearts are still hard? He refers to like the Pharisees.
Okay, first of all, what we do is we get off of, and I'm not saying this in any kind of a nasty or attacking way, we have to get off of that throne, the judgment throne. Why is it that we do this? And I don't mean just the person who asked the question. Why is it that we constantly, I get questions all the time from people wondering what's going to happen to other people. Stop that. Work on you. Don't worry about everybody else. Abba's going to work out whatever he needs to with them. Stop worrying about everybody else when you're not doing what you need to be doing. Because now you're making judgment calls. You're judging whether or not these people are actually have hard hearts or they're doing it mechanically or whatever they're doing. That's why I tell people, leave the Jews alone. Okay? Leave the Jews alone. They are doing, a lot of them are doing nothing. A lot of them are doing everything with every ounce of their being. And they're doing it the best they understand it with how they've been given understanding. That's between them and Abba. It's not for me to figure out if the Jews who don't confess Yeshua are going to be okay. I think they're going to be just fine. Because they're not confessing Yeshua because of what Christianity did to Yeshua and turned them into something they could never confess. Okay? That's not their fault. But Abba allowed it. So just leave them alone. Let's not worry about who gets in and who doesn't get in. Worry about you. Are you going to get in? Put on that oxygen mask first. And then the only ones you need to worry about other than you are the ones that you actually are responsible for. That's your family members. And by family members, I mean like the ones that you gave birth to or that you're married to. Not the ones that are above you or siblings to you. You're not responsible for all of them. You're responsible only to your spouse and to your children. Okay, even to your parents, you're independent once you got married and you left. Don't worry. Let Abba work those things out. He'll open their eyes when he wants to and when he's ready. Is it making any sense? Okay? So my first response to every question that gets asked like that is stop worrying about what everybody else is in or not. Don't worry about all your Christian friends. Most of them are going to be fine. Not maybe the way you think, but then you have to listen to the teaching I do call the Millennium and Kingdom where I kind of explain that a little bit. There are going to be plenty of people that you're worried about who are going to be just fine, but maybe not in the way that you understand it or figure it or whatever, and his timing, how he's going to do it. But you know what? You're going to spend so much time worried about that you're not going to be fine. Because you're not working on what you know, and you are responsible for what you know. He expects you to do what you know. He doesn't expect you to do what you understand. He expects you to do what you know. You might not understand it. You got to do it anyway. All you need to understand is the how to do it, when to do it, and all of that stuff. You don't understand the why to do it. When I say understand, I'm talking about the why. You just need to know all the other things. When, where, how. Okay? And do it. Because you know it. You know about Shabbat? Do it. You know about feast? Do it. You know about kashrut? Do it. You know about loving each other? Do it. You know about not forsaking assembling together? Do it. You have to understand it.
Should we attend Christian congregations if no Messianic groups are within traveling distance?
No. Was it supposed to say more?
Why do you refer us as a tent and not a temple? So back when we talk about mourners and prayer.
What do I call?
Our body a tent instead of a temple.
Because I was referring to it as just being the encasement that we have our heart, our consciousness, and everything else in. When we talk about the verse in 1 Corinthians, it says, do you not know that your body is the dwelling place of the Ruach? Okay, we understand that, okay? When I was using the word tent, I'm talking about the fact that this is a temporary dwelling. And this is a place that we're just, dwelling in temporary like a tent, okay? And so it really had to do with the metaphor matched the point I was trying to make more than saying the temple or the dwelling place. It's just using it for the metaphor I was looking for. And by the way, in 1st or 2nd Peter, Peter refers to it as a tent when he talks about it while I'm in this tent. Okay, 2 Peter 1:14, he says, knowing that the putting off of my tent is soon. That's the metaphor I'm using.
How do you overcome if you know you are lacking belief? How is belief increased?
Okay, belief is increased through two things, in my opinion. One is through doing and seeing the results. And also it's a heightened awareness that what he says comes true. That includes the bad things, by the way. When he says that your choice to follow him may cause problems with you and family members, and then it happens, that should help your belief. What it unfortunately does to a lot of people, it just discourages them because that's your parable of the sower of the seed, and they get choked off and they run away. But really, it should be an encouragement that what he said is true. Not that you're encouraged because people in your family are giving you a lot of grief, but just because the word proved true. And so things that he says when they happen increase our belief. His interventions and miracles increase our belief. But really, a lot of it has to do with in your doing, you'll realize that it does bless you and keep you safe and change you. And that also increases belief. But part of the problem is we have such a dulled, our senses are dulled to, our perception is dulled. We're not paying attention. We're experiencing life and paying very little attention to it as it's going on around us. And so we're not seeing the miracles, the interventions, the fulfillments of what he has said. So what I would say, Melissa, is first you want to do is increase your awareness, pay better attention, and be more aware of what actually is happening in your life and around you that helps to endorse and prove and validate your Creator.
What about Exodus 16:29? We are commanded not to leave our homes on Shabbat.
Okay, so you have to understand that Shabbat instruction was a progressive instruction. Okay, first they were told, just like the same thing with Passover, right? The very first Passover, they were supposed to eat it in one house, not leave until morning, put the blood on the doorpost. But later we get the instruction when the corporate nation is now going to keep this in a corporate way that they're actually not supposed to do it at home, which, by the way, is so different than all of my Jewish brothers and sisters do it in their houses. But you're actually supposed to go to a place where he places his name and do it there and not leave until morning. Okay? Shabbat's the same way. When he starts off with Shabbat, he says, look, as little children, I'm teaching you the basics. I want you to, first of all, don't do anything, stay at home, and just rest. But then later we come to Leviticus where we're getting the instructions, and the first of the Mikra Kodeshes is Shabbat, where you're supposed to assemble together. Okay? So it's a progressive instruction. Now, by progressive instruction, that doesn't mean now we have license to say, well, it's progressively evolving even more to today. No, we have to actually have an instruction written down that progressively grows the understanding. So we have from Exodus, the verse that you quoted, whoever was it with the quote, we actually have further along instruction through Moshe, where now Shabbat is a commanded assembly. Okay? And then we have it endorsed by Yeshua, who says that Yeshua, as was his custom, went to the synagogues with his Jewish brothers on Shabbat to keep Shabbat. We have James in Acts 15 saying, for in every city there are those preaching on Shabbat in the synagogues, Moshe. Okay? And by the way, there are people that will attack me saying that I don't do Torah portions on Shabbat, so I'm not fulfilling that little instruction. Well, you know what? We quoted Deuteronomy 10:12 today and 8:2 today. Those are both Moshe. We quoted Exodus 19, the covenant. That's Moshe. Moshe was preached today. Okay? Moshe gets preached every week from this microphone. We talk about Sabbath keeping, we're preaching Moshe, because Moshe gave us those laws, in written form for all of us to understand. So yes, Moshe gets preached even here every week. And so the answer to that question is that there are a few things that are progressive revelations. In other words, he gave the instruction and developed it over time for a people as they were moving from, remember, this is from moving from right out of Egypt in the wilderness to coming into the land and being a corporate people. And so that's when the instruction got more detailed and specific, how they were going to do this as a nation, as opposed to a people on the run fleeing.
Should we assemble with the congregation that you are not learning anything at anymore, or a congregation that has certain beliefs that you're not sure that if it is truth yet, but both keep the Shabbat?
All right. For those of you that are using the live stream, let me make sure I word this right because I don't want to get in trouble. If you're using the live stream and you don't have a viable congregation to go to locally. In other words, either because you're learning nothing and it's dead and no growth, or what they are teaching is, in your understanding, error on enough of a consistent basis, this live stream qualifies as a stopgap to that instruction. You are assembling, you have a chat box, you communicate with each other, you're there for each other. A lot of you I've seen in the chat boxes, you're sending encouragement and love and appreciation and well wishes, and you're there for each other, and you're participating even now in this Q&A. So yes, what you're doing now will qualify as a stopgap, not as a solution, because really, you all need and desire and deserve to have this, a physical place where people come together to hear the word preached and where you can actually eat together, meet together, and be together, which is one of the goals of MTOI, is to help plant congregations where you are and don't have one. So if you don't have a viable place to go, I'm not saying that I'd rather you go to a lousy place than come to the live stream. And by the way, I don't benefit from you being on the live stream, so it's not like I want you here on the live stream because somehow the extra numbers on the live stream put some money in my pocket or something. It doesn't. The main thing is you want to protect your heart and your mind and your growth. And if you're going to a place that consistently is teaching error, that's not helping you. If you're going to a place where it's dead, that's not helping you. You're going to get discouraged. You're going to get frustrated. And so, in my opinion, this is why we do the live stream, by the way. In my opinion, this is a reasonable, hopefully temporary stopgap. Does that answer the question? Because there are people that are telling me that they really want fellowship so bad that they now have told me they find a place, but then I go check out the place, and the place is very charismatic and very mainstream. It's very, Messacostal or Messabaptist or Messa something. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't go. I know that you're hungry for fellowship. Well, you know what? Then meet the people online, Skype with them, get to know them. And by the way, there are probably some people that aren't that far from where you are that you can probably contact and run into every now and then. That's why we have the virtual map. On our virtual map, you can find people listed that maybe aren't that far from you in almost every state here in the U.S. as well as all across Canada. Now, we don't really get to vet everybody on the virtual map, so don't be surprised you find somebody that might be a little way out there in left field or right field. But, for the most part, we hope that most of the people that ask to be on the map are actually kind of tracking with what we're doing.
I guess follow up that someone's asking about attending an Orthodox synagogue.
Yeah, but the same thing. Going to the synagogue is not necessarily going to do you any different. It's not going to do any good compared to the same problem. The Orthodox synagogue is going to teach you a whole lot of stuff that doesn't match up with where you are, and it's not going to bring Yeshua into any of it. It's going to have nothing from Matthew to Revelation involved, and these are all things that I think benefit you tremendously as you've experienced as we've been going through the Brit Hadashah, for the last couple of weeks as we've gone through the heart of the matter starting in Matthew and now working our way all the way through Hebrews. So no, I would not go and attend. Look, I will tell you this. When I go to New York, I don't have a problem visiting the local conservative synagogue with my family, my parents, but it's one thing to visit, it's another thing to attend. Does that make sense? All right? So I would not attend any of these places, but I might visit. As a matter of fact, more often than not, I don't. Even though I get invited, I don't do it anyway. But I wouldn't have a problem visiting one of these places. Now, I wouldn't visit a Sunday church, okay? I'm not going to go someplace where they're not observing Torah and keeping Torah and they're not keeping the things. At least if I go to the synagogue, they're keeping Torah and they're teaching Torah.
Isn't resuming temple sacrifice and rejecting Yeshua Messiah's sacrifice, isn't the temple in us now with the indwelling?
Okay. Now, this is going to be really hard for people, okay? But I'm going to say something that I need you to at least strongly consider, okay? And that is that a lot of things that you are running up against were invented by Christianity. Nobody in the first century and earlier had this idea, and that includes the early believers after Yeshua died, was buried, and resurrected, had this idea that somehow temple service was in some way mocking or disrespecting what happened and what Yeshua did. This is an invention of the Catholic Church in the not Judaizing, in the anti-Semitism, and we have to embrace that truth. That's the reality. There's not a single verse anywhere that backs up that idea. There's also a ton of things that show that the early believers kept the temple service. They went and did their sacrifices. And so I can promise you on Passover every single year, they went to the temple and got their lambs and did all that stuff. They didn't stop, even though they knew Yeshua was ultimately the Lamb of God, the Lamb of Yah. They did not stop these things. So it's Christianity, though, that wants to use that as a weapon against Torah observance to say, well, if you're doing it, you're making some sort of mockery or disrespecting what Yeshua did. And I've said it already, and again, it's hard to penetrate, and I'm not picking on you, it's really hard to penetrate the indoctrination. What Yeshua did, while there are symbolic connections to the sacrificial system, and there's a lot to do with temple service that points to Yeshua, what he did had nothing to do with the sacrifices in a direct way. In other words, he didn't fulfill them or replace them or do away with any of them. Nothing stopped at the temple until they destroyed it in 70. And the early believers were all Jewish, okay, all of them. They all kept going. You see, we're so well indoctrinated that's hard to, it'll go in and still won't get there. I'm not saying with the person who asked the question, I'm hoping they won't struggle, but a lot of people will. We're so well churched, we're so well indoctrinated that it's hard to realize that it's not something that's scriptural, it's something that the church gave.